Hey, everybody. Good morning. Tony Fiorino here. Welcome to Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio. I know you guys missed me. I am back. It is Saturday, July 23rd. Hey, listen, I've been gone for a while, but as you know, each week here on Hey Coach Tony, we discuss the hottest topics in youth sports that affect us as parents and coaches. As always, we open up the studio line so you guys can chime in and let me know what you think. The number here is 855-HEY-COACH. That's 855-439-2622. I want to welcome back after a very long hiatus my good buddy Adam. Those of you who remember me from my days broadcasting live from Westchester, Adam was my producer / co-op / cohort, and very glad to have him back in the saddle. As you probably could tell from this morning, Adam is still getting himself a little bit accustomed to what we're doing here in Connecticut, but don't worry about it, buddy. Love you. Glad to have you back here with us. Hey, listen, I've been gone for a couple of weeks, and I know I got a lot to catch up on since I was away, but before I do, I want to take a moment here and talk to you about something. As a lot of you know, I was fortunate enough to travel to the Premier World Series with my 14-year-olds from Team New York Baseball. This is an invitation-only event that's held each year in Joplin, Missouri, where roughly 25 of the top amateur baseball programs from around the country gather for some serious baseball. Anyway, this year was a little bit different. Hopefully you recall that back on May 22nd, one of the largest tornadoes in recorded history in the United States touched down in Joplin, Missouri, right in the middle of Joplin, Missouri, and it created some of the most devastating destruction imaginable. For a while, we were really worried that the Premier World Series was going to have to be moved to Dallas or somewhere, Austin, Texas. There was a couple of different cities they talked about. Anyway, I'm very pleased to say that the city of Joplin, in all its resiliency, was able to salvage this tournament. And I'm also pleased to say that these teams from around the country, including our own, Team New York, were able to bring some much-needed commerce and community service to this terrific city. I'm even more pleased to say that in addition to the first day of community service that all the teams volunteered for, instead of doing typical opening ceremonies, the teams from around the country all engaged in some community service, much-needed community service. But in addition to that first day of community service, my boys from Team New York Baseball, on top of playing 2 games a day in 90 to 100-degree heat, also volunteered 3 additional days of community service to help these people out. It was a very, very sobering experience for all of us to not only see how much destruction and devastation was there, but to have the opportunity to speak to the people who were so dramatically affected by this horrible tragedy. Some of you know this. I kept a video diary of our trip. It wasn't so much the baseball that I thought it was going to be, but I spent most of my time videoing? Can you say that? Recording our involvement in the recovery efforts in Joplin, Missouri. And you can check out those videos, and I hope you do. Go to my website at www.heycoachtony.com. And you can click on the videos / past shows section. That'll bring you to my YouTube channel where I kept this video diary. And keep in mind, these videos really do no justice whatsoever to the severity of the destruction and the impact that this tornado had on the lives of the terrific people of Joplin, Missouri. After you see how bad it was, I will urge you, please, do what you can. Donate your time, donate your money, donate your old clothes, do whatever you got to do, anything you can to help these people, because in the face of absolute tragedy, these kind people were absolutely the most gracious hosts you could hope for, and we at Team New York Baseball are very grateful for their hospitality. In one of the videos, you even get to hear me get kind of emotional about the whole thing, and although it's a little bit embarrassing that I lost it there, I do hope it gets the point across just how severe the situation is over in Joplin, Missouri. And for my players who are listening, which I hope you're not, because we're actually started a doubleheader about all of 7 minutes ago, don't you think for a second that Coach Tony forgot about all the crap you guys gave me for losing my composure there that day. But remember, Coach Tony never forgets. right, all kidding aside, I'm also proud of the whole Team New York organization, as we're sending at least 2 more teams to Joplin to represent the northeastern United States in their respective age groups. I believe our 17-year-olds are there as we speak. So good luck, guys, if you're tuning in online. Not only to represent us, by the way, in baseball, but to continue to aid in the relief efforts for all the families there that were affected. Now, all right, I hope I didn't bring anybody down too badly this morning or put you in a bad mood, because there are a few things that I want to cover this week. Remember, you can call me here in the studio at 855-HEY-COACH. That's 855-439-2622. You know what? I woke up, I think it was Thursday morning, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Guess what time of year it is, everybody? Yeah, that's right. It is time for the annual mania of the Little League regional tournaments and ultimately the Little League World Series. Now, there was a time when, and it's when I was a young boy, when the Little League World Series was just an obscure sidebar to the ABC's Wide World of Sports, and only the very dedicated sports fans had exposure to the one final game that was put on television, and it was usually played between who? The USA and Taiwan. That was kind of the ongoing rivalry. Well, anyway, since the days when I was a boy, it's now become one of the most heralded months in all of youth sports. If you try hard enough, you can watch a whole slew of games, both domestic and international, as regional teams from around the globe duke it out for their opportunity to play on the big stage in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, in front of millions, literally millions of TV viewers. What I want to talk about this week, some folks see this as a tremendous development and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for young ball players to shine on a truly global stage, while others see this as a vast exploitation of children who are forced to throw hundreds of pitches in the course of a week. These are typically the same people who complain each year when one team or another is inevitably caught cheating by either faking birth certificates a la Danny Almonte from the Bronx. I don't know if you guys remember him. The kid who was playing in the 12-year-old tournament from the Bronx seemed a little bit bigger, seemed a little bit older than the rest of the kids, and then it was found out that he was like 15 or 16 years old, playing on ESPN with a bunch of 12-year-olds. You remember that pathetic excuse for a human being? Well, I certainly do, because I always say if I was 15 or 16 playing on that little field, you better bat 1,000, you better have 75 home runs each week. But anyway, these are the people who complain about the cheaters like Almonte, or they complain about the folks who give phony mailing addresses to kids who come from other towns so that they can help their little town get to Williamsport. Well, anyway, what prompted me on this is one such story hit the press this week, and it just would not be an installment of Hey Coach Tony if I didn't shine a light on these pathetic losers. So you're going to bear with me while I give you some of the highlights and facts in just a second. But before I get into that, the question I got for you this week is this. What do you guys think about the whole Williamsport/Little League World Series thing? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What do you love about it? What do you hate about it? I'll be taking your calls and your emails on this. So like I said, the studio lines are now open at 855-HEY-COACH. That's 855-439-2622. Email is heycoachtony@gmail.com, and let me know what you think. Now, before I get to your calls and your emails, and I've already got a couple of them here, please allow me to outline this disgusting story out of California. It turns out that the Rancho San Diego Dogs, and they spell dogs D-A-W-G-S, dogs. So the Rancho San Diego Dogs last year won the California State 10 and 11-year-old Little League Championship. Pretty serious accomplishment, all right? Now, needless to say, if these kids pulled this off at the ripe old age of 11, the coaches and the parents must have immediately started dreaming of their opportunity this year to make it to Williamsport for the Little League World Series of 12-year-olds. I mean, this would have been an absolute shoo-in, right? This team was loaded. They had pitching. They had hitting. They had fielding. They kind of had everything. But to go all the way, you really can never have too much talent. And I'll explain to you why I say that in just a second. Anyway, these kids and their coaches were clearly ready for the limelight this year. Perhaps a little too ready. in what some people feel was a move of arrogance. When the Dogs were playing in their game this past week, or I guess it was a week and a half ago, they took off their hats for the national anthem, and folks were shocked to see that the entire team, each boy, had bleached his hair blonde. And on the fence by the dugout, one of the fans had hung dog bones, literally hung dog bones, one for each player. Now, some folks looked at this behavior and say, wow, these kids really mean business. Well, I look at the same behavior and I say, are you kidding me? You know, how about, this is a weird concept, but how about we stick to playing baseball and let's let our gloves and our bats do the talking for us. Anyway, earlier in the district playoffs, the Dogs dumped all over a team from Rios Canyon, California, 20-0 in like 4 innings. Not a very noteworthy game, except for the fact that right afterwards, a protest was filed with the Office of Little League back at the headquarters in Williamsport, and as a result, 2 of the Rancho San Diego players, who happened to be their number 3 and number 4 hitters, were kicked off the team. Little League officials had determined, and this is where I'm quoting from the article, they had determined that these players did not establish a residence of bona fide continuous habitation. Moreover, these players attempted to establish residence for the sole purpose of participating in the Rancho San Diego Little League International Tournament. Now, that's a little bit of lawyer speak, so I'm going to put this in plain English. Little League officials determined that these kids didn't live in Rancho San Diego, and that someone was trying to make it look like they did so that these talented players could play on the town's Little League team. Now, as a result, the Dogs were forced to forfeit their victory over Rios Canyon, but strangely enough, they were allowed to keep their earlier tournament wins. And this is something I just don't get, but in any event, the Dogs were still playing because of the double elimination nature of the Little League tournament. And I'm going to have to go to a break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk more about this story, and I want to get your thoughts and your comments on this whole Little League concept. I'll give you the finish of the rundown in this story, but before we go to break, you know, as some of you guys know, my son is going into his freshman year of high school, and he's really excited about his first year playing high school football. So this week, to help out with the various costs, the Somers football program, the Somers High School Booster Club, they're hosting a car wash today. It started at 8 a.m., and it's going to go until about 4 o'clock today. So please get your butt down to the mobile gas station on Route 202 in Somers, New York. The suggested donation for this car wash is just $10. So do these kids a favor and help them support this outstanding program. It's a terrific group of young men, and they're gearing up to start another successful football season for Somers High School. So again, get yourselves to the mobile gas station on Route 202 in Somers, New York. You know, take out your $10, get your car washed, and help these kids play some football. We'll be back after this. You're listening to Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio.
Coach Tony. It's baseball season.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Coach Tony here on ESPN Radio this fine Saturday morning. Hey, before we get back to business here, I talked to you guys a little bit about Team New York baseball, and you know what? If your son happens to be a top-notch ball player between the ages of 13 and 17, if your kid has what it takes to compete at the highest levels, then do yourself a favor and mark your calendars for August 13th and 14th. Team New York baseball, we're holding our tryouts for the upcoming fall season, and on August 13th, we're going to be holding them at Pace University in Pleasantville, New York. That's right, Team New York baseball is looking for the top talent in the tri-state area to round out our rosters for each of our teams. You can pre-register your child at our website. You just go to www.teamnybaseball.org. You have to put the www in there, otherwise you'll be trying to get into our corporate website, and you'll need a password, and you won't be able to do that. So again, it's www.teamnybaseball.org. As we get closer to August 13th, there'll be all the details you need about the event. So go to the website. Treat your young ball player to the experience of a lifetime playing for Team New York. Each August, we have a special showcase where our players are handpicked, and they play especially for a group of top college and professional scouts that represent the greater part of the Northeast. So really don't miss this opportunity to give your young ball player a real leg up in their baseball career. The website, one more time, is www.teamnybaseball.org. teamnybaseball.org. All right. Now we're going to get back to this story about the Rancho San Diego Dogs, the team that before we went to break I was telling you about. They had just won a significant game, and then they were told that their number 3 and their number 4 hitters were basically booted off the team because they were not residents of the town, and someone tried to fake an address so that these kids could actually play there. Like I said, they were forced to forfeit their last victory, but for some reason they were allowed to keep their earlier tournament wins, and I still don't know why that was the case. But given the fact that this is a double elimination tournament, that's the nature of the Little League tournament, these guys still have a shot, or still had a shot. Anyway, while I think it was kind of a joke that Little League let these guys continue to play, they did reserve the right, and I quote, reserve the right to take further action concerning the eligibility of the entire Rancho San Diego tournament team if additional information is presented. Well, again, I don't know what additional information would need to be presented other than the fact that coaches and or parents and or players cheated. They lied about who they were, they lied about where they lived, and because of it, any victory up until that point was a real slap in the face to the teams that unfortunately lost their opportunity to go to Williamsport. Now, up to this point, it seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, as is usually the case, no, it's not. If you were to turn the clock back just about 6 months, this story gets a little bit more interesting. Matter of fact, back in January, on the January 21st, an anonymous letter was sent to the Western Region Little League director, basically blowing the whistle on a conspiracy to stack this Rancho San Diego All-Star team with players who live outside the team's boundaries. The letter, which was sent to the local Little League officials as well as the media, mentioned 3 specific players on the San Diego Stars. Now, the San Diego Stars, who if you don't know, this is the same exact Little League organization that Adrian Gonzalez played for, Troy Glaus played for when they were kids. So the letter, again, mentioned 3 specific players from that San Diego Stars team who were registering to play Little League in Rancho San Diego. So the bottom line is this. Somebody smelled something rotten, and so they stepped up and they said something. Now, that's a noble gesture that Little League clearly could not ignore, correct? All right, well, once again, wrong. The whistleblower in question was largely ignored, and that's really a shame because guess what? And it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. 2 of those players that were named in that letter wound up being those number 3, number 4 hitters for the All-Star Dogs, and they were the 2 players that were booted off the team. Anyway, ringers or no ringers, Rancho San Diego replayed Rios Canyon, and guess what? They beat them again. But shortly thereafter, Rancho San Diego, the Dogs, they lost to Santana National in the district championship. Now, I don't know if you guys have any opinions on this, but if you do, I want you to give me a call at 855 Hey Coach. That's 855-439-2622. And I don't just want to hear your thoughts on this story. I want to know some of the things that stick in your craw about the Little League World Series in general. I mean, God knows I got my share of things that annoy the hell out of me about the way this whole tournament unfolds, but I want to hear from you. Before I get to your calls, though, I did get an email earlier on, and I wanted to address it. The email comes from our friend Kevin in Rockville Center, New York. Kevin always has something cool to say, but he writes in and says, Hey, Coach Tony, I definitely have my opinions about the tournament teams, and my gripes fall into 3 buckets, with one being consensus, but the other 2 not so much. First, my consensus gripe is, of course, the crazy parents and parent coaches who make these teams the be-all and end-all of their existence. As a regular season and tournament manager for 10 years now, I've seen parents do some crazy stuff to try to get their kids on the tournament teams. One parent put together a highlight DVD and gave copies to all the managers who were to be selecting the team. Another is a good one. Another parent offered me a box of Cuban cigars if his kid made the team. By the way, his kid did make the team. However, I declined the cigars. Well, good for you, Kevin. Before I continue with Kevin's other issues, because he has 2 others, and they're actually pretty good, let me start on this one, because Kevin does touch on something worth digging into. He talks about the crazy parents, and you know what, as is the case with any other sport, there are always going to be crazy parents, and thank God for that, because you know what? If it weren't for crazy parents, I'd be out of work. But the reality of the situation is this. In the Little League World Series, how many times are the cameras going to break away from the action on the field for a shot of the crowd? And what do you inevitably see? Somebody's grandmother wearing war paint on her face. Aunt Gracie is wearing a team T-shirt. And there are little kids who can barely walk who are dressed up in miniature versions of the team uniform. Now, I don't know, maybe it's me, but does anybody else think that this puts an enormous amount of undue pressure on a group of 12-year-olds who are already, for lack of a better term, they're already crapping their pants playing in front of so many people and on TV? I mean, doesn't that really throw a whole bunch of undue pressure on these kids? And the other thing that really grinds my gears about this point is how the parents and fans seem to take so much personal pride in the accomplishments of these little kids as if they were out there playing themselves. I mean, you ever see the shots of the dads high-fiving one another after a kid gets a hit or something like that? I mean, I'm almost 44 years old now, and I got to tell you, I am literally embarrassed for these people. As a dad, I'm as proud of my kids as anybody walking this earth. But you know what? When my kids do something great, and listen, they're pretty accomplished athletes. When they do something great, I share that moment with them by telling them. And it's after the fact. If they look in the stands, I give them a thumbs up. I give them a fist pump because I'm genuinely proud and excited for them. But I'm not going to do an end zone dance in the stands and start high-fiving everybody else looking for attention for myself simply because I planted that seed that became a pretty decent 10-year-old athlete. I mean, God, it's pathetic. All right, listen. All right, I don't want to stray too far from Kevin's email because he does have some more good things to say, and a couple of them line up exactly with some of my sentiments here. Kevin goes on to say, my second gripe, less consensus, is pitch counts. This may not be specific to tournament baseball, but it gets more glaring there, where a team really needs at least 3 dominant pitchers to go far into the tournament. I'm completely in the Nolan Ryan camp here. Nolan Ryan's camp, for those of you who don't know, is basically that pitchers these days are breaking down at higher pitch counts, and the reason is because they've never been trained how to throw more than 80 or 90 pitches. Interesting concept, and again, we'll talk about that in a bit. But Kevin goes on to say, I'm all for the days of rest rules, but to say that a 12-year-old can't throw more than 85 pitches in a game is ridiculous. I do believe the only reason I was able to, and this is Kevin speaking, the only reason I was able to throw 150-plus pitches in games in college was because I was trained to do it from a young age. Not abused, but trained. Well, Kevin, I'm going to have to go to a quick break here if you're listening, but I got to tell you, you should take some stock in yourself because you know what? Maybe you threw 150 pitches in a game because you got lit up and got racked around. But I'm not going to jump out there and make too many assumptions. I want to talk about this point because this is actually a pretty serious contemporary issue with regard to pitch counts and days of rest and things along those lines. And I'm going to get to this part of it, Kevin, so stick around if you're listening. But I do have to go to a break here, and I want to remind you folks that if you or your child happen to be in need of orthodontic services, then you really should call Dr. Sean Rooney of Rooney Orthodontics in Mahopac, New York. They're reachable at 845-621-1222. As I mentioned right before I went on vacation, I had to take my daughter back there for a follow-up visit. And I got to tell you, this guy and his practice, they really are something special. Turns out that during her last visit, we really didn't have to do anything. But Dr. Rooney still took the time to explain to her what changed since her last visit and the things that we need to look out for until her next visit. So Sean Rooney really does know how to put a kid at ease. And as a parent, you really can't ask for more than that. My daughter is very well aware that at some point we're going to have to do some work. But, if and when that happens, she's already prepared, thanks to Dr. Rooney's approach of informing his patients and coaching them through this whole process. Now, I'm obviously a big fan of Rooney Orthodontics, so call them today at 845-621-1222. In fact, Sean Rooney is going to be joining me in the next couple of weeks to do a show about tooth protection in kids and mouth guards and all that stuff, which is very important, especially with football season coming up. You can also visit Rooney Orthodontics on the web at www.rooneyortho.com. You can like them on Facebook. Whatever you do, you tell them that Coach Tony told you to call. You're listening to Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio. Stick around, folks. We'll be with Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio this Saturday morning. And what we're talking about this morning is the whole kit and caboodle around the Little League World Series tournament, because I got to tell you, some of this stuff gets under my skin, even though the mothership, ESPN, carries it, and I'm sure makes a good amount of money on it. There's certainly some things wrong with it, and I'm in the middle of an email that I got from our friend Kevin in Rockville Center, New York, and Kevin just started talking about the idea of pitch counts. There is some contemporary debate going on about the idea of pitch counts and days of rest and things along those lines. Kevin seems to think that it may be a bit of a disservice to the development of a young pitcher to not allow them to throw a bunch of pitches. Well, I wanted to stop on this point because it happens to be one of the things I do hate about Little League. Now, I applaud Little League for finally making some decisions about things like pitch counts, because at least those decisions are being made, in theory, in the best interest of the health of the kids. But I, along with Kevin, believe that if a kid's arm isn't hurting on a day that they're pitching, then it's okay for them to throw more pitches. And you got to bear with me here. The constant, as far as I'm concerned, is not pitch counts as much as the mandatory days of rest. Now, I think once a kid throws more than 30 or 40 pitches, I think they need to go on that mandatory rest period, and I think it should be, 3 or 4 days before they pitch again. Or you know what? Another thing people don't pay much attention to is once somebody throws 30 or 40 pitches, I'd make it, at least 3 days before they could even play the catcher's position, because some kids do that too. When you pitch, let's face it, it's very different than playing any other position. You inevitably create, and pitchers know this, you inevitably will create tiny little tears in your muscles in your throwing arm, and repetition and level of exertion on the arm is just plain bordering on violent. And I use the term violent for the following reason. Have you ever seen a super slow-mo of a pitcher throwing without his shirt on? Like, they actually show the arm and what it does and the kind of torque that it takes. Well, if you haven't, then get your butt up on YouTube and look it up, because if you're a coach or the parent of a young pitcher, it is one of the most sobering things that you're ever going to see. The movement of the arm, the snapping of the elbow, the quick constriction and relaxation of the muscles is there's no other way to describe it. It is actually a violent motion. Now, the only problem with my theory is this, and my theory, again, just so you understand, is we should not have mandatory pitch counts. We should be focusing on mandatory days of rest. Now, the problem with my theory is this, and if you were thinking about calling with it, you can still call me. It's 855-HEY-COACH. But if you don't have pitch counts in place, guess what? There's always going to be a Mongo coach with no brain who's going to simply overuse a pitcher, plain and simple. So before you call me and yell at me for that, let me be clear. The big caveat in my plan is that if a kid begins to fatigue, then you take him out of the game. I don't care if he's thrown 20 pitches. If a kid's feeling even the slightest bit of a twinge in their shoulder or their elbow, you take him out of the game, period. How do you enforce this? I don't know. Maybe you have somebody like a fight doctor in boxing who's at the games and they can gauge the fatigue of a young pitcher. But, whether you think it's 85, 105, or 1,005 pitches that a kid can throw in a day, the one thing that remains constant is the necessity for the arm to rest and to heal itself. There is research being done as we speak that is soon going to show, at least in my opinion, will soon show that rest is more important than pitch counts. Because, again, think about it. If you weight train, or if you run, or if you do any type of physical activity, at the very base level, the only way to improve, in other words, the only way to get faster, bigger, stronger, is to push yourself basically to failure. And in a healthy way. I mean, you never want to hurt yourself, but the idea, if you've ever lifted weights, is you're pushing yourself to the point where your body really can't do much more. Your muscles then basically become damaged, slight tears, lactic acid builds up, and your body, being the amazing machine that it is, rebuilds those muscles to do what? To be better prepared the next time it has to go through that activity. So the muscles get bigger, they get stronger, you become faster, whatever. So again, I think training pitchers to build up more endurance and more arm strength is actually a very good thing. The caveat, again, is do not push a kid to the point where he has pain, and make really, really sure that that kid gets through an entire process of lack of a better term, rehab, meaning the icing, the running, the healing process. Now, but again, Little League, I don't have a lot of good things to say about you, but good job looking out for the kids. Problem here is I don't think you're solving the right problem. Now, listen, again, Kevin wrote a very lengthy email, and I should have just had him on the show this week because he has another point here, and I want to get to it. It's another good one. Kevin goes on to say, my third and biggest gripe is the way these tournament teams are selected. I've been in these meetings for many years, and every year I end up giving the same speech to a contingent of Tony La Russa wannabes. Team selection should be about rewarding the kids who had the best seasons, not about constructing a winning team to bring glory to the hometown. 3 years ago, I was so disgusted with this process, I almost quit coaching for good. The third best player in the league was a really good kid who just loved baseball. His father was dying, literally dying in the hospital. During team selection, the majority of the managers felt that this boy was too slow and the team had enough pitchers without him, so they wanted to leave him off the team. Reminded of his personal situation, they said that shouldn't matter, and they were trying to construct a winning team. God forbid Rockville Center didn't win the district. Coach Tony, there's no happy ending here. The kid did not make the team. His father died a month later, and the kid never played baseball again. This sucks. Well, Kevin, I'm going to give you that. It certainly does suck. And it's kind of disgusting to hear a story like that. But I got to tell you, while I agree with some of the things that you said on this last point, there are some things that I got to debate. And you know what? If you're listening on the Internet, give me a call here in the studio because I want to talk to you about this one. It's tough to say, first of all, who's the best or the third best or the 10th best kid in the league. But I'll give you this much. If a kid is even considered in the top 10 in your league by all the coaches, then I really couldn't imagine why he wouldn't be chosen for that tournament team. But let's put that aside for just a second, and let's talk about this like adult human beings. Should this kid, who is, let's say, at worst, a decent player, whose father is lying in a hospital dying, should this kid be chosen for the tournament team? Absolutely and without question, yes. Kevin, if what you're saying is true, and you know what, I have no reason to doubt you. You always have something cool to say. Please do me a huge favor and go out on a limb and send me the names, the phone numbers, and the addresses of these low-life scumbags who sat in that meeting with a straight face and said that this kid's personal situation shouldn't matter, because I will gladly risk the lawsuits, and I'll call these dopes out on the air, because a more sickening story has never been told. And by the way, if you're one of those guys and you're listening to the show, please, I beg you, please call in, because I would love to take a piece of your butt right now and learn what would possess an adult man to say something so stupid. Now, having said that, Kevin, get back to reality for a second here. Should the tournament team really be chosen to reward the kids who did well that year, or should it be comprised of the kids who have the best chance of winning and bringing some glory to the hometown? You know what? That one's not so easy, Kevin. It's really not. First, let me say this. At the age of 12, those two things, in other words, having a really outstanding season and being the best representation for your town, those things typically go hand in hand. But let's assume for a second, for your story, that it does not. If that's truly the case, I got to admit that my personal opinion is to go with the kids who represent the best chance of winning and bringing glory to the hometown. And bear with me because I'll explain that. After all, this is a tournament team. And the goal is to win and to ultimately, as much of a long shot as it is, ultimately to get to Williamsport and to win a true world championship. Granted, of the thousands upon thousands of teams that each share that aspiration each year, only one of them is going to make it. But if that's truly the goal, then you got to prepare for that goal. I mean, how often does a group of 12-year-old boys get an opportunity to bring glory to their hometown? Not very often. Matter of fact, usually it's never the case. So if a group of boys is lucky enough to catch lightning in a bottle and legitimately has a shot to go deep into this Williamsport tournament, then I say, you know what, so be it, and good luck. And the reason I feel that way, and I'm not saying I'm right, So if you want to challenge me on it, like I said, the lines are open at 855-HEY-COACH. But the reason I say that is as a younger man, I was lucky enough to play for national championships more than just once or twice. And speaking from personal experience, I will tell you this. My first year, to take my own trip down memory lane, my first year with the Bayside Yankees, I was nothing more than a role player. That's what I did. I was a utility player who filled in. I ran for the catcher. Occasionally I would pinch hit. But that year, we were the very first team from New York to ever win the NABF World Series. And you know what? It felt great. There's a second part to this story, and I'm going to get to it after we get back from break. I'm going to have to take a break here for a second. So if you're hanging on the edge of your seat thinking about Coach Tony and his younger days as a stud ball player, you're going to want to stick around for this. But before we go to break, listen, we're back in full swing. We're staring right down the barrel of fall. So if you think you got what it takes to go toe-to-toe with me here in the studio, you know a terrific coach or administrator who might be a good guest on the show, let me know. I've had a lot of fun having guests on the show so far. I really like the idea of inviting some new guests along. So if you are, or if you know a great coach or great administrator or just a great, kid sports-minded guy, give me an email. Contact me at heycoachtony@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Hey Coach Tony hotline after the show at 855-HEY-COACH. That's 855-439-2622. If I pick you to be on the show, you're going to get the world-famous Hey Coach Tony T-shirt, or you might even be lucky enough to get one of the Hey Coach Tony coffee mugs. Apparently they're in great demand because I'm gone for 2 weeks and I can't find my damn coffee mug again. Whoever's stealing my mug here at the studio, guys, I'll tell you what, I'll get you one. Just leave mine alone, will you? Anyway.
Coach Tony.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, with Tony Fiorino on Hey Coach Tony. Right before the break, I started telling one of my own personal stories, and, my show, I get to do it. As I was saying, Kevin and I were talking about, do you pick the best team to represent your town, or do you just, give a shot to the kid who had a good season? And I was just talking about how my first season with the Bayside Yankees, I was a utility guy. I played sparingly. When I got in, I did my job. That year, we won a national championship. I happened to pinch hit in the very first game, and I happened to win the game, driving in the tying runs, and I scored the winning run myself. And that's obviously a moment that I'm always going to remember. But my second year, and here's why I tell the story, I wasn't a utility guy. I wasn't a fill-in guy. I was one of the studs. So I went from being the youngest kid on the team to a legitimate age kid, and I batted 3, 4, or 5 in the lineup the entire season. And when we went back to reclaim our title at the NABF World Series, I was fortunate enough to be chosen for the amateur All-American team. And guess what happened in that championship game? If you guess, you're going to be wrong. We lost. We got all the way back, and we had a chance to repeat as national champs, and we simply came up short. And people sometimes ask me which of those 2 years was more impactful for me. And you know what? It's never really easy to answer. Personally, I had obviously a lot more success in that second year when we came up short. But you know what? Nobody is ever going to be able to take away from me the simple fact that for one season, when I was 15 years old, I played on the best team in the country. It's a pretty cool feeling still to this day. So, to get back to what Kevin was saying, I wouldn't necessarily write off the importance of giving kids that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to play and to win on a national stage, because again, it's something that'll never be taken away from them if they're fortunate enough to get there. Now, Kevin, I just want to one more time tell you, great email. You always have something very, very cool to say. Matter of fact, I'll probably send you a Hey Coach Tony T-shirt, even though you're never here. If you can get your butt up to Connecticut, you got to join me on the show. If you have anything to add to this, or you got something to say, or anything you want to challenge me on, call me here in the studio. It's 855-HEY-COACH. It's 855-439-2622. But I want to get back to some of the things that specifically drive me nuts about the whole Little League World Series. For me, I got to tell you, as much as I like watching the games on ESPN, and I'm hesitating because guess what? I'm on ESPN Radio. I personally think that our good friends back at the mothership go a little bit over the top when it comes to how these games are produced. And I mean produced from a television perspective. Do we really need guys like Oral Hershiser giving us a play-by-play? Do we really need to know the stats of each kid as they step up to the plate? Now, I personally find this really annoying. And for me, it takes away from the purity of the game at that level, meaning these are little boys. We don't need to treat these kids as if they were professional players. It should be enough that they're on ESPN, for God's sake, right? I mean, why do we have to try so hard to make these Little League games feel like Major League games? They're not. Isn't part of the appeal the fact that these are 12-year-old boys? I mean, isn't that part of the reason people watch these games? They're 12-year-old boys. Let's treat them that way. Now, on that point, I do want to get to another email that I got from Hank, who wrote in from Bethel, Connecticut, and he brings up a good point. He says, "Hey, Coach Tony, each year I find it more and more painful to listen to the ESPN announcers." Everyone's dropping bombs on ESPN, man. We got to lay low. I'm going to get fired. But anyway, each year I find it more and more painful to listen to the ESPN announcers talk about how pitchers are setting somebody up with one pitch and then coming back with a second or a third pitch. I know the jury is still out on whether or not curveballs are detrimental to a young kid's arm, but you would think that until there's definitive and conclusive evidence one way or the other, that these announcers would maybe even at least talk about the potential side effects of a 12-year-old throwing so many curveballs. Hank, that's a good point. And again, thank you for the email, because it really goes right back to what I was just saying. For me, and apparently for Hank too, there's no real value add in having somebody discuss the subtleties of pitch selection and pitch sequence at the 12-year-old level. How else do I say it? If I was really interested in stuff like that, I'd be watching the Yankees and not a group of 12-year-old boys. Just let them play. Ask them who their favorite player is. Tell me the name of their pet back home. And let's hope they do some really cool things at bat or in the field, and stop trying so hard to push a level of sophistication on me as the viewer that just isn't there. It's just not there. Now, on a side note, there's one thing I wanted to say. One thing I love about the Little League World Series and the whole regional tournament is this. And some of you may know, before I began coaching Team New York, I coached a younger group of boys on a pretty competitive travel team. Anyway, in some ways, this was my favorite time of the year. You want to know why? Because as a coach of an elite travel team, we always made it clear at the start of our season that we didn't want our players playing on any other teams. It's not a ridiculous request, but back to why I love this time of year. When the players turned 11 or 12, we knew there were going to be a handful of nonsensical parents who really believed their kid was going to lead the hometown team all the way to Williamsport. And so when the Williamsport tournament began, each year we would start to get the most creative reasons why kids would want to miss games. I don't know how many of you are out there who are baseball coaches and have gone through this, but you would be amazed at how many mythical grandparents in August would go into the hospital one week on a game day for us, only to die the next week, guess what, on a game day. And of course, depending on religion, there would always be a service a few days later, guess what, miraculously also on a game day. And each year, these untimely sicknesses and deaths seem to magically align with the opening week of the hallowed Williamsport Little League tournament. So for you coaches who actually believe these illnesses and deaths are real, and for you parents who think that we coaches are truly mentally challenged and don't know what you're doing, I hope I shined a nice bright light on this one for everybody. You got something to say about it? You know what? Call me up and challenge it. All right, listen. I got one more point I want to get into about the Little League World Series before we break out of here today. And this one, this is a pretty recent development. Does anybody else think that the days of the 46-foot mound and 60-foot bases are just over, or is it just me? Think about it. The Little League baseball field that the Williamsport tournament adheres to was developed, like 100 years ago? Literally, or over 100 years ago? Anybody out there ever hear of evolution? I mean, have you seen some of the 12-year-old kids walking the earth nowadays? These kids are shaving, they're 6 feet tall, And sometimes watching these games on this little field can start to get a little frustrating because as a baseball purist, somebody want to tell me I'm wrong, go ahead, but there's no realistic timing involved in Little League Baseball anymore. On one hand, you got a kid who's throwing in the high 70s, which I think is the equivalent of like 112 mile per hour fastball. So most kids struggle to even see a pitch, much less adjust to it or any nuances of pitch location. And then on the other hand, on the other side of the equation, you have kids that are holding these toothpick-like, super alloy, futuristic bats that trampoline the ball off at record speeds. So if a kid so much as sticks his bat out and makes contact, the ball flies clear over that minuscule 190-foot wall that they have up. The game as it stands now has lost all its purity at the Little League level, and I, for one, am truly saddened by it. Most legitimate programs are moving the better 12-year-olds to what we now call a modified field. It's typically like a 55-foot mound, 75-foot bases. And having experienced this with a group of 12-year-olds myself, I can tell you that it makes for a much more realistic game. And you know what else it does? It is a well-needed adjustment for these 12-year-old boys who, in just one more year, are going to make the move to the same size baseball field that the Yankees play on. I mean, it is a legitimate major league size field. And if a kid goes from a Little League field to that field in 1 year, it's painful to watch. Trust me. I don't know if this one is easily solvable. I really don't. But I personally would love to see Little League make an official switch to that modified field. I bet it would make watching these games on ESPN even that much more entertaining. Lastly, before I leave today, I do not want to get through the show, and, when the music comes up, Adam, don't worry about it. I don't want to get through the show without acknowledging the amazing accomplishments of the U.S. women's soccer team. A lot of people have said that they were a disappointment, and some feel they choked in the final game. You know what I say to those guys? Shut the hell up. These amazing young ladies rejuvenated our country once again and reminded us that sometimes it doesn't matter what game you're playing as long as you put everything into it. I was down in Joplin, Missouri when Abby Wambach had scored that amazing header goal against Brazil to put the game into overtime. And I'll admit it, you know what? I was watching women's soccer, and I was enjoying it. I was so very proud of those ladies. And even though they didn't win the whole thing and they came up a little bit short, I was just so proud of them because they helped me remember what sports is really about and why we all get so fanatical about it. There's just something about watching one of our own, whether it's our kids or our countrymen, go out there and achieve. So once again, I want to give special congratulations to the U.S. women's soccer team on a great accomplishment in the World Cup, and thank you for making me mark my calendar in anticipation of the Olympics. Best luck to you all. Hey, folks, you know what? That's going to wrap it up on my first week back. It's so great to be back in the saddle, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show. Every Saturday, 9 a.m., I hope you join me. Keep the emails and the phone calls coming. Join me next week, again, every Saturday, 9 a.m. for Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio. Enjoy the week.